Okay, so the outcome of the match may not be how you like it, or the general result is not what you wanted, or is different than what you thought. And that's understandable. Me, my friends, and even my team and I, we've had our fair share of those emotional moments that have come to pass in each combat that we've taken part in, and we've worked to triumph over it each time as it came and as it presented itself. I notice with a lot of the gamers in this new era coming that accepting a loss or accepting that other players are better or more skilled or competent in different ways is a lot harder to accept now, to a point where you don't want to accept it. You want to get better, yes, but at the same time you also have to acknowledge that there are faults that you have, and those cannot be ignored, yet you're choosing to ignore them. Focusing in the areas that you do well in is good, and that is a key to victory, yes. However, you also have to take into consideration what it is that you lack, or what's a lack thereof that you have ignored or have not delved into in order to improve upon, because the fault could be visible to your opponent or to other people around you, even if it's not visible to you, the heralder of these abilities and said capabilities in question. This is why practice and repetition of what it is that you're trying to improve upon is key, and also having it come to memory. That way when you go into a basic confrontation, not so much a serious confrontation, but a basic confrontation, where everything you're doing becomes second nature, and it becomes easier in order to execute the moves. It becomes easier to have general movement across the environment, in which you use the environment to your advantage as well as said movement. And in a serious confrontation, that's when pressure is mounted, because it's a match where you feel you have to win, where it becomes more of a mission to make sure you do well over trying to just generally have fun in the match, in fighting a set opponent, whether or not they are stronger than you or weaker than you or on equal par as you. For the general competitive player, those types of strenuous matches may not be as tedious as one would assume, because it's an environment that they've grown accustomed to over time. Whereas for the general player, period, the general player that does not usually partake in said one-on-ones or any type of competitive activity, these things are generally very difficult to do and require a vast amount of time in order to grow accustomed to the new environment or to a new inclusion of said gaming activities. This differentiation in the mindset of combatant capabilities and general growth in getting better in playing a video game is understandable. Why? Because the way a player gets better in this community has changed, and I've noticed a very big change in how players get better, or how they say they're getting better or are choosing to get better. And it showed in stressful situations or in very competitive situations. This is where it is shown the most, because it's what you will be doing on the spot, rather than it building up to that moment when you encounter somebody in the field or in a one-on-one. It's what you do on the spot, and if it comes to you normally, then you are prepared. But if it doesn't come to you normally, then you are not prepared. So, consider this. Escalation mode. Yes, while it is a tactical-based 15-wave game of survival, this single-player game mode does offer the player a chance to be able to use all of the weapons offered in the video game. In addition to that, you can also be familiar with or utilize all 4 different classes offered in the video game, with all 4 different map choices. I wish that they would have taken the idea from WFC's escalation format and mechanics in order to allow you to be able to choose what player or what character class for what map, but I digress with the obvious. Having weapon familiarity is good in conjunction with maneuverability around the map, because you want to be able to know how to use what weapons with what perk setups on what classes at what times, especially the favorable times when your opponent would not be able to expect the gun, or if they do expect the gun and or the tactic or the setup, it won't be as easy for them to counter because you have them in a corner somewhere, or you will eventually back them into a corner. I already know that there are a few of you that say that this suggestion in growth is useless and a waste of time, but again, I want you to consider it because, granted, yes, being familiar with an opponent is more important than being familiar with an AI or automated intelligence. But if you have the opportunity to know your opponent inside and out, yet you don't know how to shoot the gun that you have or use the weapon in a smart way or in a clever way in order to deal damage or to force your opponent's hand, you don't know how to use the weapon at all or use anything else other than the same thing, then what is the point, I'm asking you? Because this leads to a predictable pattern that the opponent will be able to easily pick up on much faster than you may assume. Also, escalation mode helps in the familiarity of different frames for the different classes you can use, because how to use a frame also helps in maneuverability, just in generally moving the character. We all have chassis and frames that we may favor, and we also have chassis that we do not favor, or just don't use because we don't like how it feels. But there are others that do use it because it works for them, just like the one that you use that works for you. And you may find it to be a harder use or a harder shot to shoot at, but just take a minute in order to try it out and try something different. That way it puts you in the driver's seat, so to speak, about how that frame is used and how you have to move. If you have an idea about how that frame moves, then you're already in your opponent's head about how to take it out, because you know they're going to have to move here or they're going to have to move there in order to hit you or to set up whatever it is they're going to do in order to hit you or to eventually come at you, and you'll already be one step ahead of them. Why? Because you took the initiative in order to know how that frame moves that they're using, so you already know what they're going to do next before they potentially do it. Also, consider this. Practicing with a friend. Practicing in a friendly one-on-one with a friend is one of, if not the most effective way to improve your own natural capabilities. It's fine making a mistake because it's all in the point of getting better. That way you know what it is to do, what it is not to do, and how to move faster. That way you can make damage faster, you can get the point faster, you can get the kill faster, however it is you need to play to win. And again, as I previously stated, there is no shame nor harm in losing, or even in taking good joy in winning, or taking joy in losing a practice match, because it is not the real deal. The point of a practice match in general is to become familiar with what it is you're doing, what it is you're choosing to do, how you play, roles, the people that you're around, and how everything you're doing will eventually come to you. Also, mixing this up with different people also helps too. That way you get used to changing up how you play rather than being accustomed to doing the same thing over and over again, because eventually it will not work. Your opponent being changed or changing up your opponents will also force you to change up how you play. Because if you play the same way against the same person or against two different people, eventually the two will not be able to mix. You have to be able to play the same with a few edited tools into your repertoire to use, or you have to play differently against different players. If anybody ever told you that you can use the same thing twice against the same player or against different players, I'm afraid you're sadly mistaken. Mixing it up a lot is key to staying a step ahead, because it'll be a lot harder for you to be predictable. The less predictable you are, the more successful you will become. In summarization, these are what I wanted you to consider in order to help improve yourselves. or to help improve yourself in general. However you may need to take this, that's all well and fine. I state these facts in order to help other players out there, even those I know or don't know, improve, because I feel that the perception in how to actually get better is being tainted by pride or selfishness that you're gaining over time. I don't know how this is happening, nor do I care. It's not my concern. It's personal business. Sometimes it's personal affairs. And in turn of, rather than getting better or listening to other people that are watching how you play and are trying to help you, you're choosing to be salty or be disrespectful or ignorant in some way. And in doing so of this, people that are playing with you or that play in the same atmosphere or just play with you in general, they don't want to play anymore, or they choose not to help you any longer, or all the same step away from being associated with you any longer because you're being unreasonable or you're being butthurt about things that you can't control as well as you thought you could. I've said it once before and I'll say it again, losing is a part of winning. It doesn't matter how many times you lose, as long as you learn something from the loss, that's the true victory, because it means that you won't do the same thing again that will result in the same conclusion. If you hop from match to match to match and you're constantly losing them, and you don't learn anything from them, then why keep going? You need to learn from why it is that you're losing and how you're losing in order to know how to win, and from then to keep winning or to not lose as often. In this context, I can use myself as an example rather than using other players or the endeavors of past players that no longer play. Because I was lucky enough to have a good opportunity over this year, started the past year in full and a little bit of the year before so far, in having met or fought either in one-on-one or in general full frontal combat against a number of the most powerful or iconic or most recognized gamers in the history of the franchise, including the ones of past and the ones of present, and the ones that are yet to be. I use these as examples because the general outcome may or may not surprise you. A number of examples of past opponents I've fought and learned something from would be such opponents as Dark Primus, or Stratosphere, or Yugal, or Lord Megatron 187, or Edjo, Numties, Ravage Boy 66, to the Great Ash, to LGFMB, Pro Destroyer, Jacob the Usher, A11, Mexi Prime, Straxus Prime, and many others as the list may go on, and probably does go on. But my journey speaks for itself. There are many times where I've succeeded, and there are many times where I've failed, and there are many times where I've surprised myself in the general outcome of things. And the example is for this. The last time I fought Bolts and Brains before we stopped playing the PlayStation 3 system and moved to PlayStation 4. I went head-to-head with him in a TDM session for about 2 or 3 sessions. It went back and forth and back and forth. I wasn't able to defeat him at any one point in time, but all 3 times I was off by 1 or 2 points from successfully topping him. And that practice of all the different times I was able to either kill him or get successive headshots on him all came from practice that I've done over and over again, either in campaign mode to some extent and in escalation mode. Escalation mode predominantly, since it's a whole survival based thing, and you want to be able to know how to make use of what health you have and how much health you have before needing to run away or turn your back to the enemy for any one specific second of time. Otherwise, what ground you have is automatically lost and you're killed. While running for health isn't always a bad thing, it might be seen as cowardly. In TDM, it's not so cowardly. It's a part of endured playing before eventually getting killed by something and then respawning in. But consider this, and this is the mindset that most expert players do tend to fall on, is that don't always run for health when you need it unless you feel you really do need it, but rather that I don't need it, and that it's a luxury that I will take in charge of and go get only if I feel I need it. Use the whole environment to your advantage in order to get as much damage on the opponent as possible. Do not rush getting in all the damage as possible. If a chance comes to back up, sometimes it pays to back up rather than to keep pushing forward. This execution may borderline along reckless playing, more so than thoroughness. Another example I will list is numpties, actually. The very first time I fought him, yeah, I got beat pretty bad. The second time I was able to fight him after a huge amount of time, where I was able to learn from what it is I was lacking at the time I initially fought him, I was able to be a far more formidable opponent in my own right. And in doing so, we ended up having the exact same score and tying in team deathmatch twice, with 18 points between us. Me at 18 and something kill, or deaths rather, and him at 18 and 0 back to back to back. This end result came from much practice between all four classes, and the most popular setups between all four classes that I was able to adapt to my own playing style, and my own techniques in my own regiment, and from a mass amount of practice in escalation mode, from where I can practice specific setups or popular setups for said classes on, popular setups on specific classes. This way it'll allow for much more effectiveness when you go to try to aim down your sights. And in doing so, it helps in effective kills being stacked in your favor. Another example, Optimus 543-1209. It was definitely one of the more harder opponents that I've fought on the grid. There was one time where I was able to successfully defeat him in a one-on-one, and this was in a scout one-on-one. And only scouts was I able to successfully defeat him. The tactic here that I used for that match, which anyone can generally use, is to pick the right map that not only can or cannot work for you, but to pick the map that is either least favored or least used, or is not generally used for the type of class match that you're going to have if you're using one-on-ones with only a set class, or if you're using an all-around one-on-one where you can use all classes. Pick the map choice, or try to have someone pick the map choice that favors nobody. That way it is truly fair game, and it requires how much you do know about the map and or your opponent that truly decides the match. And in doing so, I succeeded in defeating my opponent, even though it was only by 1 point and 1 point only. A win is a win. Another example is Star Wars Boy 66. Yes, the famous SWB of Conquest himself. I've had my share of matches with him also, none of which I have won. But each time I fought him, I learned something new about it. The very first time I fought him was actually just by chance when I was out in the field when I was testing my new equipment, and out of nowhere I get sideswiped by the guy. Then the time comes later on down the road where, out of favor to a certain ACW leader, I get a chance in order to fight Star Wars Boy for the very first time ever. It was a very interestingly educational match that I did lose very, very badly, but I learned something about how I play along the way in said time of losing the match. And over time I got better using what it is I specialize in, or what it is he specializes in, the destroyer class as it is, or leader class, however you want to name it. And eventually time was able to grant me the rematch that I so sought with him, in order to test my skills again against the same opponent that is of extraordinary might. And in having that rematch, I saw what it is I was lacking right away every single time I got killed. And I already knew that it would be pointless to have a rematch after this, because I gave that match everything, literally everything I would have to offer at that time, at my best. And it wouldn't change the outcome. I still got trashed really easily. Whether or not he was rusty or taking it serious, I know not. But I already know where he stands, and I know where I stand. A rematch is pending, however I am honestly in no rush to reach said rematch. I will be better equipped for it, yes, but as it stands, I honestly do not think the outcome will change unless there is more that has to be attained in my own right, which I'm working on now. And I review the past matches I've had against my opponent, or opponents, over and over again in order to learn where it is I failed, and to learn and be acquainted with more effective gameplay that I still need to have. And in doing so and having it, applying it at a faster rate in order to get the kill faster, or to be more effective faster. Another example is ACW Grimlock, or Paul Bunyan as they once called him. He goes by many names now, however the output of combat is all the same. This was an opponent that once defeated me continually all the time, back when there were a number of players coming up in the same due process between Sandy Babe or R Darky and the likes. However, over time, I was able to apply what it is I was losing with each match that we had, be it exhibition match for fun, practice match, or serious match in tow. I was able to learn something about myself every time we crossed paths, and in doing so, eventually I could defeat him. And by eventually defeating him, it now goes back and forth as a general struggle. So sometimes he wins, sometimes I win. Kind of like the Lost Boys and the Red Man from Peter Pan. Sometimes they win, they turn him loose. Sometimes we win, we turn them loose. That type of ideology, if you understand the reference. If not, that's okay. Another example is Galactic Knight 12, where the very first time I fought him in a match, we had tied 3 to 4 different times in sessions back to back to back. And the one time I was able to successfully have a match with him in a one-on-one situation, that match had also ended ambiguously in a tie. Another example here is Cybertron 555. Just like with ACW Grimlock, this was another opponent that eventually I could learn to match once becoming better acquainted with controls, mechanics, familiarity with the opponent, understanding my own strengths and weaknesses, and applying them in due process in said situations when needed. Now, change of pace. I know there are times that does inevitably affect gameplay and productivity in said gameplay. It weighs on you that you also lose the opportunity in battling or in fighting said opponents that you really want to fight, like an end goal, as it were, that you work towards, that you really want, like you really want to fight this guy and you want to go all out against this guy, or you want to have a rematch against him, whatever it is, one more time. I want that one more time, just to see if I can handle it. Or I want one more match, so I can beat you. I understand that mindset very well. Why? Because there are a few opponents that no longer play that I would have liked to have the honor in fighting one more time to see if I can actually best those people. There are many times where I've thought that, and there are many players that no longer play anymore that I would like to have the honor in fighting one more time. But it is necessary to move on and to seek a challenge elsewhere. Because there's plenty of oppositions and there's plenty of opponents here that may not be the same person, but could present a challenge in the same way or in a different way of the same might or caliber that you may be overlooking. Also, a challenge can be sought from the newer competition coming up in the community. You'd be very surprised that a noob or an inexperienced player or a novice can potentially have the same merit as someone who is a veteran player or who's been on leaderboards for many years or who's been playing the game for many years. You can be very surprised. The community is always changing and the players are very different. Remember, these players come from all over the world, so there's a chance you could encounter somebody that you never thought you'd meet that could pose the same type of representation as a past entity that you've encountered. This realization is generally why I myself have turned my attention to looking at newer players rather than at older players, because it's the newer players that will continue to surprise you if you give them the opportunity to grow and prosper like they need to grow. And I always seek to give them that opportunity or that fair shake of a battle and watch the magic happen. Same as burying the hatchet or just laying it all to rest in order to move on and seek newer opportunities out there in the world that is presented. I myself once let not being able to beat a small handful of people almost consume me to a point where I was becoming either stupid about how I'm thinking or the decisions that I make become idiotic. because I'm constantly clouded by the fact that I can't ever fight this guy again because he doesn't play anymore or because he doesn't want to fight me anymore. That's the time where you need to let it go. Their decision has already been made, and in tow of their decision, this now presents a new decision for you to make as well. Because at this crossroad decision, this is where playing the game or playing a video game can grow to either become work and it doesn't become fun anymore, or it can be fun and you can prosper. People or players have made the right and wrong decisions all the same, and it either does or doesn't affect the growth of the community. Whether or not it's a ripple effect or not, can't say. But what I can say from experience is that letting it go and turning your attention to other challenges that are offered either above your level or on your level is a better option than being consumed by one opportunity that is lost. It's not a wise decision, as there are other choices that are here for you that you are neglecting on purpose. Also, on the other side of the fence, in that regard, there are some people that have also made it a point only to just fight only strong players. How they assess strong players, I know not. But if this is your decision as well to rest upon, then it is also a driving force, as it is a mental catalyst in keeping your mindset focused to the main task that you've given yourself and that you can better yourself towards. There are pros to this and there's also cons to this. The cons that you find out after the fact, the pros that you are experiencing currently, during, and prior to the fact. While it is fine to seek out one general opponent, also be mindful of the status of said opponent and just don't stalk them. But anywho, I made all these examples here, and I used even myself as an example in my journeys as an example rather than other people, because I want to take the time to sit here while I'm waiting for my stuff to download and try to help the newer players out there. This was originally directed at 1 or 2 people, however, I think having this directed at a general totality of players is a lot more of an effective message. Now, originally, players that are unhappy about losing, or that are unhappy about losing numerous different times, or that it's difficult for them to win, they usually get either told off, or they get yelled at, or it leads to a whole bunch of rage quitting moments, rage joining moments, however the hell you want to name it. A whole bunch of situations pretty much where it's just like, hey, just get fucking good. Like, seriously, stop being butthurt about losing. There's no harm in it. Just keep playing the game. Don't make it work for yourself. Stop whining and bitching and blah 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 blah. I'm not like that. There are some ways in didactically handling these situations and being mindful of said person's feelings without having to hurt their feelings unnecessarily, unless you do just have to come right out with it and hurt their feelings. But truth is the truth, no matter how it is reached. The truth, in the words that I've depicted here for the viewers today, is to go over and review yourself. This is all the stuff that you can use in order to help reevaluate you and how you can improve yourself if you feel that you're lacking, or if you're not happy with the way things are that are for you and how you're playing. I'm going to take the time to sit here and go over and review things that could potentially help you, because I can. Other people out there could just as easily do the same thing, but choose not to because it could be seen or felt as a complete waste of time to sit here and go over everything if there's a chance you're not going to listen to it, or you're not going to be open-minded about helpful tips. While I do agree with that theory, I also want to take the extra step in actually doing it, so it's not an opportunity missed in telling people out there what they need to hear. Whether or not they think what they're doing is right or wrong. If there's something that they're doing that's not beneficial to them, that's the point of why this is here. Be it prideful or hard-headed, if they choose to listen or not to listen, that's fine. I don't care either way. But the facts to help people grow is all right here before you. And on a higher level, the power is in you and what you do next. If you're smart about how you play, you'll know when and how to make the right moves. Trust me. I've been there.